Hello, and welcome to the Kathleen Spracklin podcast. I am a woman on a mission to assemble a cadre of writers, thinkers, and teachers who are transforming the world one character at a time. And it all starts with one thing: a deep understanding of human motivation, why people do what they do, and the forces that drive them. This is episode 31, Organizing Principles for Emotions, the challenge. I've been reading a fascinating book by Lisa Feldman Barrett, How Emotions Are Made. It's a really interesting scientific look at how emotions come about in the human brain. I found that rather interesting because I'm taking a look at the driving forces of human behavior, which is a set of challenges that can be represented by character traits within the individual. So what's the relationship between character traits and emotions? The character traits are categorized by a struggle where there is a decision to be made and there are voices arguing for one side versus the other. And the voices and the struggle are expressed in the form of emotions. So naturally I was interested in a book that talks about how emotions are made. But I was rather interested, I started off reading chapter 6, so it was so fascinating that I've decided I'm going to start back with the introduction. But she talks early on in the introduction about a classical model of emotions as being pre-coded responses that come about from basically evolution and from emotions that mankind has experienced for the whole time that they've been on the earth. Now, at first, I thought that was rather similar to what I'm studying, quite similar, because I'm researching struggles that man has faced since he's been on the earth. But when you look at it, they're really quite different, because Lisa Feldman Barrett challenges the classical assumption that our emotions are the thing that came down to us through all of human evolution and all of human history. I would tend to agree with her on that, in that I believe it's the struggle that takes that place. But she turns around and challenges it. She says all classic psychology textbooks present this concept of emotions being this central organizing principle, and that they're universal to mankind. And then she challenges it. So since I disagree with the opening principle, the question is, well, do I agree with her challenge? Does she challenge it in the same way that I would challenge it? Or does she challenge it in a completely different way? Well, she appears to be going in a completely different way, because she's talking about basically biology and the human brain. And I'm basically talking about ultimately fiction writing. So my abstraction point isn't going to be cells and neurons. It's going to be struggles, because struggles can be conveyed in literature. But I think it's rather interesting to look at the kinds of problems that you would run into if you decided to take as a pool all of human emotions, assuming that they were handed down to us through evolution and genetics, and that they're stable in the human being. And her work calls that into question. But even for a moment, assuming it were the case, how would you go about organizing emotions? And the answer is that it becomes very, very difficult to do so, because emotions are not the point of organization. Emotions, as I've looked at them through these podcasts since the beginning, are based on 3 different emotions that organize themselves around a struggle. And the interesting thing about the 28 different character traits that have been pretty thoroughly analyzed is that you you do not end up having 3 times 28 different emotions. You have 28 different struggles, and to some extent 28 different feelings of victory, but even that isn't complete. And you certainly do not have, in one sense, you have more than 28 different loss emotions. In another state, you have fewer. But the loss state emotions are very disorganized. For example, anger can be a loss state response to several of the different struggles, because anger can arise for so many different reasons. So if you were trying to understand all of these 28 different struggles based on the loss state emotions, you would be very confused very quickly. And I think that's the problem with trying to organize these, whatever this thing is that may or may not have come down to us through evolution, in the form of an emotion. It's very similar to the problem that I ran into reading the book by Peterson and Seligman, Character Traits and Virtues. They were trying to organize things around the victory state. What produces health? What produces emotional positivity? And boy, am I in favor of emotional positivity. I think positive psychology is something that is inherently very interesting to me, because that's what I want to organize with my fiction writing. I believe fiction writing can help people make the transitions they need to make, or have the understanding that they need to have to be able to make positive changes in their lives. This is separate from emotional illness, which I think is very different from emotional health. And in that regard, Peterson and Seligman definitely take the position that positive character traits and positive psychology is not synonymous with absence of mental illness, that mental illness is a separate process and problem. So, but if you look at the challenge they had when they wanted to construct a taxonomy of positive character traits, they ran into much the same problem, because again they were looking at just looking at emotions. They wanted the positive emotions at that. So they were just looking at a set of positive emotions and trying to organize things. Well, if you're trying to make an organization out of something that isn't the organizing principle, then you're not going to get very far. Also, the interesting thing about a taxonomy is that a taxonomy can be proposed. And then the question that you have to answer once a taxonomy has been proposed is the taxonomy useful? Does it seem to be complete? Is it deficient? Does it guide in ways that seem to make sense? It's a concept. It's an idea. It isn't an experimental result. Although you can test it to test its utility experimentally, the taxonomy itself does not come out of experimentation. And that's kind of where they also tried to, Peterson and Seligman tried to get their taxonomy out of research, and it wasn't terribly successful. So I'm really very interested to go forward. I'm just scratching the surface on all of this, but already I'm finding it very, very fascinating. I wonder just how far this struggle is going to be able to go to bring unity to these different branches of philosophy, of psychology, and theology, because these struggles are at the point of intersection of all three, and I think that's extremely exciting. So I will continue to share what I learned with you and try to help create a consistent picture, and you're invited to just be along for the ride if you like. I'm going to just continue to muse on what I'm discovering. Thank you. Bye-bye.